SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Lakeland Yard and Garden would like to wish you a safe and happy holiday season. Visit us for great gift ideas, fresh cut Christmas trees, wreaths and garland, collectible ornaments, and more. Happy holidays from Lakeland Yard and Garden.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C Spire. Power your home or business with C Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C Spire. C Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music. We're running out of weeks in 2025 here, Rhino, as we kick off another one.
Howdy.
Man, we just learned in our little weekly meeting there of content folks and hosts and news people that we got 29 days left before the old legislature gets assembled back under that dome downtown of just a few miles for our location here. Going to be back in there working on making laws again. Oh, boy.
Yeah, I missed the meeting. I'm running on about three and a half hours.
Well, that's what I heard. Everything good?
I put in for just a vacation day, just to burn my last one for the year, because, like you said, we're running out of weeks.
Yeah.
And the boss gave me a call this morning and goes, hey, I'm looking at your day off request, and I've got something I got to do right in the middle of it. So can you work today? This is literally right after I'd hit snooze on my alarm. Yeah, I'm going to miss the meeting, though. I don't have enough time. So,
well.
I got up and got going, and so if I sound like I'm dragging, I am.
Oh, you're good. That was the main thing that came out of the meeting, is that we're approaching that time where those legislators come back into town. They gather up in their respective spots there. The question is the Cyclops ready to deliver the bills down the hall as they create them laws? Well, measures that they hope become laws, at least. That's the big thing that's going on there. So the president says, once again, at the Kennedy Center last night, he was there. And, of course, the news wasted no time in approaching him. And you have to give it to the president. He never says no, no matter where he is. I don't know that he's ever declined to take a question or two from the media. And they questioned him last night. They hit him with some issues. One of those,
I would say, unless he's with his grandkids.
You're right about that.
He doesn't tend to stop when he's with them.
And that's fantastic, because he prioritizes his grandchildren and provides them, I think, what is warranted deference in that respect. The heck with the dang media when you're there with your grandkids. Agreed. So he was at the Kennedy Center honors last evening with Melania. Lovely as always. Trump in his signature tuxedo for the Kennedy Center honors event. I just like a man in a tuxedo. I think he looks really good. He looks great there. But he says when was asked about elimination of the income tax because of the tariff revenue that is making its way into the Treasury's coffers. He said there's so much money being made. Quote, but I also think we are making so much money with tariffs that we will also be able to make a nice dividend to middle-income people. We're talking about middle-income and lower-income people. We're not talking about dividends to rich people. But there's so much money being made from the tariffs, and countries that were taking advantage of us many, many years are not taking advantage of us anymore. We're taking in tremendous amounts of money from countries that we were losing lots of money to. And you know what? They are okay with that. They're not complaining. They're not complaining about the tariffs. They would rather not have them, but they're not saying there's anything wrong. So the president, again, doubling down on the prospect of eliminating the federal income tax due to the tariff revenue flowing into the Treasury. Man, I'm all for eliminating the federal income tax, but it is, I think, appropriate to just do a little math here. In Joe Biden's last year, we collected about $150 billion of tariffs, and in the president's first year, it's about $300 billion. So it is doubled under the Trump tariff provisions and policies. But here's the deal. The federal income tax is $2.6 trillion. $2.6 trillion. So you can do the math there. We would need for tariffs to completely replace the income tax to increase to $2.3 trillion more by that amount, which means that the tariff rates and the imposition of those tariffs would have to rise by about 10x what they are today. And of course, if you did that, the consumption of those goods and services would decline dramatically just because they'd be a lot more expensive. Keep in mind that American companies pay tariffs, importers do, foreign companies or countries do not. I think that's starting to get out there more and more. People are starting to realize that's how that works. So, man, I'm all for it. I'd love to get rid of the income tax. I think at a minimum, the best thing we could do for the economy is eliminate the tax on capital gains. I'd like to see that happen immediately. Now, the left would go nuts because they would say that only the rich people would benefit from that. I disagree. And I know they love to pound on this economic notion of trickle-down economics, which is really a ruse in that they hijack it and try to explain it, describe it in a way that is really not accurate. But yeah, you go start taking more money out of people's pocket. I don't care how much money they have and how wealthy they are. It will affect. One thing for sure, you may not believe in, you may not be able to substantiate trickle-down economics, but what you can do is prove trickle-down taxes. There ain't no doubt about that. So he says we're going to have enough tariff money to eliminate the income tax and pay down debt and pay dividends on top of that. I don't see it with $300 billion in a $7 trillion budget. That's the fundamental problem, is $7 trillion of spending, and there doesn't seem to be any relief in sight for that. Also, the Supreme Court, they have agreed to hear the president's birthright citizenship case. Man, this is going to be landmark. This will happen, I believe, next year is when that gets underway. The president did issue an executive order that would bar government from recognizing the citizenship of children born to illegal immigrant or temporary visitor parents. That's been blocked by the lower courts, but this past Friday after the show, the Supreme Court says, yep, we're going to hear this thing, and this all is connected to the 14th Amendment, the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment, which was adopted to grant citizenship to newly freed slaves and their children, really not to the children of temporary visitors or illegal aliens And that's the contention of the Trump administration, that it's been hijacked somewhat. I do agree that it has. I think can show that there have been cases, can we not, Rhino, of just people coming over here and dropping their baby so their baby is a citizen, so that they can participate and enjoy the numerous benefits associated with being a U.S. citizen, but just seems kind of like a backdoor approach there. That's a nice way of putting it. Often there's some malice and nefarious intent involved as well. So we'll see what happens with respect to that. Up there in Minnesota, they've been rocked by massive fraud. I know you're shocked at this. Massive money, massive fraud. Originally, it was thought to be some $1 billion of Medicaid fraud, social services fraud, where they're just bilking the taxpayers. Now it is estimated to be perhaps $8 billion. Just unbelievable. And I'm going to say once again, this is virtually 100% a function of inadequate, defective, poorly designed, poorly administered electronic systems. That, and layer on the Rhino, it's not my problem, people. And that is a recipe for $8 billion of fraud. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio. Wayne Carr, the Southern District Public Service Commissioner, at 11:20.
Of you, baby.
This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Now back to Middays with Gerard here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth studio. So we got these subsidies that are expiring at the end of the year. Talking about the Affordable Care Act, the Unaffordable Care Act, enhanced subsidies. And it looks like, and this is something I predicted, and man, I don't want to say I told you so. I'm not really big into that. But we did say on this program that ultimately I felt the Republicans in the Congress would sign on to extending the enhanced subsidies. That I believe that was a political calculation and to some extent rooted a bit in pragmatism. And here's what I mean by that. They continue to tell us that they're cooking up a plan, but they ain't got one so far. None's been presented. Concepts have. There's been some casual mention of let's do this and let's do that sort of deal, but nothing specific that has been put in a bill that you could put on the floor to pass. Like, what the heck have you been waiting on? This thing's been out there since 2010 is when it was enacted. And you spent a whole bunch of time and money just trying to yank the whole thing, and that didn't work out. And I think, honestly, as time goes on and it gets more entrenched, more embedded, it just makes it that much more difficult to unravel. So where is it? So now I'm seeing some members, Republicans, say, yeah, let's extend this thing for a year, give us time to debate a replacement. And then I've seen some say, let's extend it for 2 years. What about just letting it expire and return to what it was before COVID? So one of the proposals is, well, let's extend them, but let's put some limits on income that would be eligible for the subsidies. And then I see them come out and say, yeah, people making $500,000 a year shouldn't be eligible for subsidies. I totally agree, except they're not. That's the problem. And here's what I mean, is that the explanation is that the way the subsidies are calculated, the premium tax credits, they limit your out-of-pocket expense of premiums to a percentage of your household income. So at $500,000, they would be limited to 8.5% of your household income. That's $42,000 a year of health insurance. The average family coverage expected in 2026, $26,000, which is crazy. $26,000 for health insurance for a family. Average across the country. Compare that to your own costs here in Mississippi, which is relatively low compared to the rest of the country. But the person or the household making $500,000 a year is not getting subsidies. So please, Republicans, speak to the facts. First of all, I'm for letting them expire. But if you're going to renew them and extend them with some income thresholds, just tell the truth about that. A couple making $500,000 a year is not getting a subsidy. They make too much. And unless they got $60,000 a year health care insurance. I don't know even know that you could buy that. Now, there's no doubt that there's some situations where you know about this, Rhino. We talked about it. You had some folks that were retiring but not eligible for Medicare yet because of their age. And they said, you know what, if I can go out and get this subsidized coverage, I'm just going to quit working, literally. And now the enhanced subsidies are set to expire, and that could be a problem for them because of the $85,000, which is the threshold there. And they make $86,000, they get zero subsidies. They make $84,999. And their premiums are capped at 8.5%. Yeah, for a couple, that'd be about a $10,000 subsidy a year. That's substantial. I think a lot of people would say, yeah, that's worth it. So I would say those were poor decisions made by those people that were, I guess, counting on these enhanced subsidies being permanent. So that's what's going on. I sure would like to see the Republicans offer some actionable ideas. The only thing I've seen thus far, and I'm kind of 50-50 on its value, and that's Josh Hawley. I've said before I'm not a big fan of Hawley, but he's come out and said that, hey, we should be able to deduct our premiums and our unreimbursed medical expenses above the line, meaning you don't have to itemize, because most people in this country don't itemize. Therefore, they don't get any additional benefit from those unreimbursed health expenses. In order to deduct your medical expenses, you must itemize. That's number one. And number two is only the amount that's above 7.5% of your adjusted gross income is eligible. Very few people meet that threshold. Very few. Just doesn't give much benefit there. But he's proposing, hey, let's get rid of that requirement, just let you deduct them above the line, your unreimbursed medical expenses. And that would certainly help. It's not going to help as far as your premium costs are concerned, but it would help your net disposable income somewhat. But that's what's going on there in Washington, and we're going to see more about that. The Federal Reserve set to meet Wednesday. We will have a rate decision, about an 80% chance, according to the futures markets, that they will cut the benchmark interest rate by a quarter point. The market's still a bit uneasy about that, and that's why the Dow's down 136 points today. The NASDAQ, last I checked, was up slightly. The volatility index also up. The funny money's still kind of hanging around there. Last I checked, Rhino, about what, 85, 88, 90,000, something like that. The 10-year yield, this is very disturbing, and that's why markets are down. It's up to 4.18%. 90,000 is what Bitcoin, I just saw it across the screen here. And that's got markets nervous because the 10-year should be coming down. Still, they don't have confidence that this whole inflation monster has been tamed, and that's why you're seeing those bond yields come out the way they are. Here at home, candidate for governor Andy Gibson has said in some recent discussions with the media that he would like to see the legislature address the PERS issue, the Public Employees Retirement System. He's calling for a dedicated stream of revenue to shore up the fund. And, of course, if you don't make any changes to the benefit structure, that's about all you got. You got to just transfer more money into the program. Actuaries said you need about $200 million for somewhere between 10 and 30 years to achieve that goal of being solid as a defined benefit plan program based on the funded ratio. Wow, that's a bunch of money. So we got that expense that we're staring in the face at, staring us in the face, I should say. We got that expense. We got a decline in the phasing out of the income tax that is ultimately going to lead to certainly lower revenues from the income tax perspective. The question is, can we make up for that lost income tax revenue with sales tax revenue as a result of economic expansion? I mean, that's just a question that still is out there, that is expected, certainly predicted and projected. People would have some degree of more money in their pocket to go spend. That, of course, would be subject to, assuming they spend it, sales tax, which would generate revenue. So that PERS issue is going to be a big one, but something else that folks need to be aware of is the reconciliation between your federal income taxes and your state income taxes vis-a-vis tips, overtime, and the qualified business deduction. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break and some more stuff at home. Stay with us.
From the Seabrook Dock.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert, here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. Louis from the 662 says, want to get rid of a tax? Let's start with the property taxes. Can you name another purchase that you make where you pay taxes on the purchase for the entire time that you retain ownership? You know, Rhino, I would guess here that seems to be the most detested tax of all, right? Property tax. And I'm with them. I hate paying property taxes too, but I also understand the various funding mechanisms for the governmental jurisdictions. So keep in mind, property taxes go to school districts, counties, and municipalities in Mississippi. Pretty much that way across the country. And Mississippi's property taxes are somewhere in the middle as far as the burden. You get into the high tax states, I know we've talked about that. It's New York, New Jersey, Illinois, California, Connecticut. Outrageous. I mean, it's insane. how high the property taxes are. But I get it, Louis. A lot of people don't like property taxes and would prefer not to pay them. The question is then, how would we backfill that revenue to the school districts? Now, I know immediately people are going to say, well, let's cut spending. I'm for that too. But I don't think it's possible to cut spending at the school district level to the point that you wouldn't need any property taxes. I don't think that's possible. You're thinking about it, I can tell there, Rhino. But,
well, the first thing that came to mind was the bevy of laptops given to students across the Magnolia State that you don't have to have.
Yeah, and it was laptops and Chromebooks too, mostly. So
I mean, put those in the same camp.
Yeah, okay. And a lot of that came from the COVID money that ran up our debt at the federal level. Remember, they went crazy buying all that gear because you got to be home. Can't go to school. Can't go to the school building to go to school to get your education. You got to do that because, remotely.
Yeah, you got to deal on the laptops, but every kid gets a laptop.
I agree.
And then the schools and school districts have to pay for some portal that only works in that school district to connect everybody via the laptops.
Right. I hear you. I agree.
And a certain percentage of the laptops never show back up at the end of the year because they wound up in the pawn shop.
Right. You're talking about, just doing the math in my head there, the state spending on K through 12 is about $7,000, roughly, per student. And on average, the local contribution is about 30% of that. So if you're talking about $1.5 billion or so, that's what it would amount to. Can you cut $1.5 billion out of the budget? I don't know. Especially when you got teachers saying we're leaving unless we get a raise. So we're facing that dilemma as well.
Even though they've had 5 raises since I started this job.
I know, but all the other neighboring states are upping their pay for their teachers, and they're siphoning ours off. Is a problem, and we're having problems getting people to pursue education, public education as a career. And then, of course, you got counties. I mean, that's their primary source of revenue. So how would counties receive their funding? Is there expenses that can be cut there? If they got zero revenue now, zero, can we operate a county with zero revenue? Because that's where the vast majority of their funding comes from, property taxes in the county. Zero revenue. Because everybody I talk to in the county world says they're constantly chasing roads and bridges and infrastructure and all that sort of stuff. And you hear that from the public. The roads suck. We need better roads. Well, we don't have any money. So if you cut all the funding out to the counties such that they had none. Now, there is a way to address that, which is the more conservative approach. It's consumption taxes, sales taxes. So I know Florida is thinking about eliminating their property tax, but they're going to do it by increasing sales taxes. They're just going to say, hey, look, counties and cities, you have the right without approval at the legislature, at the state level, to increase your sales taxes. And that's exactly what would happen. So it's not like there's this just silver bullet panacea, the word you like to use, which I like as well. Hey, look, we don't need this money. No, that's not what's going to happen. They're going to cut the property taxes and just transition to a consumption tax. So Florida would end up with a 12% sales tax. It's already 9.5%, all in, city, county, state. Already considerably higher than ours. And lots of things in Florida are subject to sales taxes that aren't in Mississippi. Like your rent, for example. If you live in an apartment, you pay rent in Florida, you pay sales taxes on that. So I think that's what you'd see. And you'd see the extension of sales taxes to a lot of things in Mississippi if we got rid of the property tax or reduced it significantly that are currently exempt from I mean, there's a certain amount you can do, and I'm for an all-the-above solution. Let's look at how we can inject some efficiencies and adopt those in city, municipal, and county operations. Absolutely, we need to do that. And the same with schools. I'm an advocate for heavy-duty school district consolidation, although I warn that that's likely not to produce the kind of savings I think most people expect. It's usually not a put two together and just get rid of one. Usually doesn't work that way. But, yeah, you could achieve some savings, and then there's problems in that, well, the people in this district don't think like the people in that district. They have separate boards that govern those districts, and they have differences on what that ought to look like, and so you may end up succumbing to the education philosophy of people you don't agree with. That's the other risk when you do that. Just pointing out something to be aware of, but there's no doubt property taxes are unpopular at a minimum. And we should find a way to transition that to consumption taxes. I think most people would say that we call that a tax swap. Wow, you should cut my property taxes, but you increase my sales taxes. Not happy. Really no easy solution to that. Meanwhile, every mayor we talk to in every city says, yeah, we need more money for roads and bridges and water, aging water infrastructure. There's a constant pain of having to keep up with it. And residents say the water's terrible. Well, the water's terrible because we need to modernize the water systems. We're at the point where much of that was installed a long time ago, and they haven't really maintained it on a continuous basis, and now they're facing a much bigger problem in trying to modernize those systems and then find the money to do that. And of course, last year, the way the budget went down in the state, we didn't have the special projects, much of which is money that is allocated at the county and municipal level for just that, roads, bridges, water. And they're all looking for that again. So, yeah, so Louis says consolidate the 150 districts down from 15 to 20. Well, I would point this out, Louis. You know, a lot of people point to Houston as having one big school district. It's true, but their administrative expenses aren't any lower. If you chop those into 5, you'd have the same thing. In consolidate 5 into 1. So you could go down to 15 to 20. I mean, why don't we just consolidate the counties? Just take 82 counties and half those. We just need 40 counties. Same thing. You think about all the expenses associated with the county, but we also believe as conservatives that government is best and functions best when it's closer to the people. And when you're just kind of lumped in to the same basket with other people in other counties, I don't know. We have a hard time getting people to agree that a student ought to be able to go 3 miles down the street to a different school in the same county, right? I just can't imagine it. But what about consolidating Rankin and Hinds counties? Think that'd be popular?
Part of the problems with doing the main problem with doing anything to reform or reimagine education is because the powerful people in education and academia have entirely too much free time and can bug the hell out of elected officials to get their way. No doubt about it. And they do. There's no doubt. I personally witnessed it in the Capitol. There's no doubt. But guess what? Yes, I'm calling out you, Mr. School Administrator, Mrs. Vice Principal. You have entirely too much time on your hands for the amount of money you take home. But let's take stock of what the structure looks like. The lower level governments, the municipalities and the counties, they're lobbying, and the school district, they're lobbying in the Capitol for more money. And the people in the Capitol are lobbying Washington for more money. And the problem with that is they don't have to make ends meet, and they just borrow money, and that's why we got $38 trillion in debt. Yeah, here, look how good I am. I brought you home more money. Right, but where'd that come from? Oh, don't tell anybody. We borrowed it. That's the fundamental problem of why we're $38 trillion in debt. There's no doubt about it. And they brag about it. I brought home all this money to you. But you borrowed it. There's nothing to brag about. Coming right back.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays from the Element Well studio. Just did a little quick research on the Florida effort to eliminate property taxes. It's going to be on a ballot next year, I believe, and it in Florida would require 60% of the voters to ratify the measure. 60%. So it is expected, as thought, that the state would end up having to, actually it would happen at the local level and county level, increase sales taxes. And just doing the quick math based on the state's GDP, which is $1.7 trillion. That's the world's 15th largest economy, by the way. For comparative purposes, Mississippi's GDP is $158 billion, so it's less than 10% of Florida's. Based on the amount of revenue property taxes generate at the municipal and county level, they would have to increase sales taxes by about 2 percentage points on everything to make up that revenue. That means everything would be taxable. I don't know what of that $1.7 trillion of GDP is subject to sales taxes. You would have to know that figure to know exactly how much, but just roughly 2 percentage points. I think most people would balk at that.
Especially the people that are most heavily impacted by property taxes.
Yes.
Older people.
Yes. Correct. Which is
because
crazy.
Once again, we point out the average age of the new home buyer is 40.
Yeah.
Nobody under 40 can afford a home unless they got in on Bitcoin when it was $5 a piece.
That is exactly right. And it's insane to think about that. Actually, I think the average age of all buyers, right, 59, new home 40, as you pointed out. Yeah, which is crazy to think that's where we are. Well, so the realtors say that this would cause the property values, the property prices, home prices to increase by 9%. That's their projection because you don't have property taxes. So I don't know that that's necessarily a problem. It keeps your mortgage about the same, so you're not gaining anything is the point. If you're paying property taxes and then all of a sudden those property taxes are eliminated, but the cost of a new home goes up 9%, you haven't gained anything. If you're in a home, you gained a lot. Your property value just went up. You're not paying property taxes, but it may be harder to sell your house if you wanted to get out of it as a result. Just complicated issue.
It just feels more and more like every single quote-unquote red button issue in America when it comes to politics is pointed in one direction, and it's to the benefit of people 15, 20, 25 years older than me.
Yeah, I hear you. And I don't disagree with you. And in fact, talking about Andy Gibson, who's, of course, a candidate for governor, he's talked about eliminating income tax. I don't know if you've seen this, for those who are newly married, as long as they stay married. I think that would be rife with fraud, personally. I don't think that's a good idea. And that's not our problem. Our problem is we can't keep the people that we need to stay here and reproduce. We keep getting older, our population in Mississippi, and they're more dependent, as you point out, on the young people. That's just a fact. Man, we're watching that destroy Japan right now, are we not?
Yep.
Destroying Japan. We're rapidly approaching a point where we'll have more people over 65 than under 20. That's a bad situation. It's why Elon Musk warns we're going to run out of people if we don't get after it. And the birth rate's way down, way below what it needs to be to replace it. And what's so amazing to me about this, Rhino, is I can't even begin to tell you the amount of communication to my generation as elementary school students about population growth and overpopulation, right? That was just a huge deal. It's pollution and garbage, and you're not going to have any place to work and live and all that kind of stuff. So what's happening now? The population explosion. You just see it all over the place. You used to get the little weekly readers.
Well, it happened everywhere except the U.S. Well, not everywhere, but
during that period, that's right.
It happened in Africa. It happened in India.
That's absolutely right. And the problem is their economies are such that, of course, rife with corruption, that, yeah, you're bringing more people into the world, but they can't produce if they wanted to and carry their own weight because of the brutal corruption. It's just it's a very tough question. But back to this property tax issue, I'm not for just saying, hey, if you get married, no income tax. Well, heck, if we can eliminate the income tax on them immediately, well, let's eliminate it for everybody. You got to go get married to do that? I don't think that's a good plan. That's my opinion. I get the goal. The goal is to incentivize people to get married. But the real goal is...
There's already a tax incentive to get married.
That's right. There is. It's especially in Mississippi with the way the $10,000 exemption works, deduction works. So it's time for a break right now. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio. Once again, it's Wayne Carr, Southern District Public Service Commissioner at 11:20. Hour of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays from the Element Wealth studio. It's a Monday. That means it's a short show. Ricky Matthews, Super Talk Outdoors, coming your way at 12:05. Mo said there's no reason for there to be more than one school district per county. If nothing else, you save money on other superintendents' salary. Yeah, did a little math on that, Mo. It's about $7 million a year, assuming that you could consolidate and eliminate the superintendent and everybody else would be retained. But you know what would happen? You'd end up with assistant superintendents. So if you told a superintendent, hey, you're going to make $100,000 a year and your workload just doubled, I think there'd be some pushback on that. And by the way, that's the average superintendent salary. You know, there's some that are higher than that, some lower, but just did the quick math on that, looking at the latest report. The mean is 100. The median is a little higher than that. It's 120,000. So, but I hear you. I think we definitely need to embark upon a plan and consider a plan that would consolidate where it makes sense. I would say this, Mose, if you told the people in my county, Madison County, you're going to be combining with Canton. If you told the people in Hinds County, in Clinton, in Hinds County, you're going to be part of Jackson Public Schools, in Hinds County Public Schools. Whoa, there'd be a war. It's more difficult than, I think, just saying, hey, look, one per county. I think there's some counties where absolutely we need to do that immediately. Makes no sense in some of the really small ones, especially if they've got bloated back offices. I also think we ought to take the A-graded districts. Let's look at their org chart. Let's look at the breakdown of their income statement and see where their money is being allocated. Back office versus the classroom. Now, in Mississippi, it turns out it's about 9% of total education spending goes to administration. That's a little higher than the neighboring states. Definitely that means we got some work to do there. Some of that's because our teacher pay is low. If the teacher pay went up, that figure would actually decline relative to the states to which we compare that figure. But I hear you. Let's see. The idea of no income tax is popular on the C Spire text line for newly married couples. I would take it a step further and adopt Poland's plan on families first to address the declining population. So I don't know. So go get married and you don't have to pay any income tax. I just can see all kinds of problems with that. What's the What's the value of that? How does society benefit from people getting married? Unless they intend to have children and the children stay here. How do we benefit from that? You pay less taxes, so we get less revenue to the state treasury. I don't know.
Which I point out again, married people already pay less taxes.
Correct, they do. So if you're already married, you get no break. But if you get married, and then what if you get married and then 2 weeks later you get a divorce, you get married again? How's that work? I can just see all kinds of problems with that. I'm not sure what the goal is. I don't know what the objective is. Now, what Poland
to promote
did,
down home family value.
I got you. That ain't. You know what would happen is all the people that shouldn't get married would get married to scam the system. I'll also point this out.
The same way they scam the system by avoiding marriage.
Correct. The vast majority of the people this would affect don't pay income taxes in Mississippi now already. And by the time this were to go into effect, unless the legislature acted on this now, which I don't see happening, it's 3.25% income tax in Mississippi. 3.25%. That's more than nothing, but by far there are bigger issues like the cost of health care, the cost of groceries, the cost of property, housing, and all that sort of stuff. So what, just so you know what Poland did, they just enacted this a couple of months ago, 0 personal income tax for eligible parents raising 2 or more children. You got to have 2 or more children, and then you have 0 income tax in Poland. They have to be minors or adult children receiving some sort of specific care. And by the way, it only applies to households whose income's less than $70,000, which already don't hardly pay any taxes. Well, that's the point I'm making. I don't know about Poland. It might be significant in Poland. But in Mississippi, that amounts to, especially when you consider the way you point out, the way we calculate our taxes in Mississippi, where as a couple, where you take the standard deduction, the personal exemptions, and then you get the $10,000, and then it's everybody at that point, you pay 4% of that. It don't amount to a whole lot at the end of the day for a household making $70,000. I'm not sure it moves the needle, I guess is what I'm saying. And they say that does Poland, the reform is part of a national strategy to ease the financial burden on families, increase disposable income, stimulate consumption, and encourage higher birth rates in Poland. But is that what we want? Do we want to give people money to have babies? Didn't we try that? Didn't that kind of happen before?
Fairly certain that's the whole point of the tax breaks when you get married.
I thought we've been trying that. Don't we hear conservatives say all the time, and I'm with them on this, well, they go have all these babies because they know they can get more money for the government. Isn't that what this is? How is this different? You qualify for this and that and this and that, and then they end up scamming it like the SNAP program and Medicaid and TANF and housing assistance. You don't know who lives with who and who's what in what household. I think I shared with you, we have a listener that's in the propane gas business and travels the routes in rural Mississippi. And out of respect, I'm not going to tell you his name or the company he works for. I'm just giving you the facts here. Says, yeah, you go to these houses, you don't know who's living in them from one trip to the next. But remember, that's what's being used to qualify for these benefits.
Which is what you really need to start taking a long, hard look at if you want the middle and lower classes to actually succeed and have a future and be able to feel confident in bringing a new life into this world to continue their line. You got to make it to where you don't have to make 6 figures to get ahead of the moochers sitting on their butt playing video games, eating Cheetos, and taking your tax dollars to go wherever the heck they want to and do whatever the heck they want.
Because to your point,
because by the time you start stacking up every single benefit, the free phones, the housing, the food, the child care, all this kind of crap that your tax dollars go to pay for because they're too lazy to get a dang job and better themselves, you got to make almost $125,000 to equal all that crap.
And those people, to your point, the $125,000 say, you know what? I'm not in a position to afford a baby. And they're the ones that can and that you want to reproduce. It's the other ones that you're talking about that are sitting on the couch. They're just pumping out babies. I know somebody's mad at me right now about that. Don't care. Is it the truth? Heck yeah, it's the truth. So that's why I don't think this is a good plan. This, I think, exacerbates an existing problem. Working on reducing property taxes in Mississippi, I'm all for that. And I think the solution to that is to convert to a consumption tax, to transition. It's a combination of cutting wasteful spending. You got to look at that side, that part of the income statement, and coming up with a way to replace the needed revenue with a consumption tax as opposed to what everybody hates, including me, is the property tax. It just feels so devious when you have to pay that bill. Now, a lot of people that pay it on their mortgage, they don't so much focus on it. You know, it's just kind of part of their mortgage payment. But if you don't have a mortgage and you got to go pay that out of pocket, or you own property that's subject to property taxes where you don't have any mortgage on it, it just hurts when you got to go to the dang tax collector, write that check. It's coming up, by the way. Coming up in January. You got to do it again. Rusty says, and we hear this a lot, make income tax 10% with no deductions. You make $1,000, you pay $100. The problem is, Rusty, define make. There are 10,000 pages of IRS code that define what qualifies as income. It's brutally complicated. I know that typically people think, well, I just got a W-2 here. It says what I make. Man, that doesn't come close to all the various sources of income. When you get into these complex business transactions, oil and gas is brutally complicated, the way that is calculated. Real estate trust, real estate transaction. What's income? That's what's hard. And CPAs get paid a lot of money just to take that giant stack of all those documents. Let's see, what on here is income? You get dividends that are qualified dividends, non-qualified dividends, exempt dividends, and all that kind of crazy stuff. And nonprofit, and it's just brutally complicated. And look, we've created the system. We have to be honest about it. We're going to take a break right now. It's Wayne Carr, Southern District Public Service Commissioner, next.
Winter.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's do this.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Let's go.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Well Studio. Kicking off a brand new week here. It's our pleasure to welcome now Wayne Carr, Southern District Public Service Commissioner. Mr. Commissioner, good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so little background. You were elected in the last election cycle to the post you currently serve in.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir.
How's it been going?
Been going great. Been, drinking from a fire hydrant, as they say. So, it's a lot of challenging times going on in our state and throughout the country.
Sure.
Power is a big issue, water is a big issue, and gas is a big issue. So, and all of those components is right in line with what's going on in our state.
Well, I'm sure you probably hear this a lot, but what most people are looking for is some relief with respect to their costs, their household expenses related to their natural gas bills, their electricity bills, their water, where you guys have purview. What kind of update can you give us there?
Yes, sir. As far as the gas, we have a lot of new pipelines coming into our state, getting ready for this new growth. As far as power generation, about 76% of our power generation is natural gas, and we got about 16% nuclear. So it's something that everybody's aware of in the industries, and they're kind of getting ahead of the curve on this. There's 3 new power generation coming on in our state, which is around 2,100 megawatts, and so we need gas. And our folks that are looking out for that they're getting ahead of that curve. We have some expansion on some gas storage in the central part of the state, which are supposed to double the capacity. And there's also some discussion about some new capacity places going on in the Southern District. So we're moving at warp speed, but it just seems like it's not fast enough.
Yeah. Well, and the president, of course, and our governor are highly focused on this need. The president talked again this morning, about the need for this country to stay ahead of our most ardent foe in China in the artificial intelligence race and quantum computing race, and he acknowledges we got to have electricity, got to have power.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And they're projecting, I think it's 1,300 more gigawatts in the next by 2030.
1,300 gigawatts.
Gigawatts, which is 1.3 terawatts. So it's a lot of power.
Yeah. And so what's the current U.S. capacity? It's about half that or so, as I recall.
Yeah, we got a long way to go real quick.
Well, you just mentioned what's going on with respect to expansion in Mississippi, and I know Entergy, a major player there, is investing a lot to power the data centers in the central Mississippi area, increasing their output by about 50%, as I recall, with these new projects, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They're doing a great job. For planning for this. And this planning just didn't happen overnight. This is going on long before I was even in the commission. So this has been going on for a while.
So let's talk about that. And we had your colleague, DeKeither Stamps, for the Central District Commissioner, in a couple of weeks ago. We've had Haley Fasackerly, the CEO of Entergy. He's been in discussing this as well. But the concerns people have about the consumers possibly having to cover these additional costs to power these data centers, and of course AWS negotiated a contract directly with Entergy that was outside of the scope of approval of the PSC, but of course now they're making some rate adjustment requests in accordance with the process. That's what we talked to Commissioner Stamps about. What can you share with us on that?
Well, parts of that contract we're not
right.
We don't.
Yeah,
we can't.
It's confidential.
Yes, sir. But I take full confidence in what Mr. Haley is telling us and what the governor is telling us. They're looking out for our ratepayers, and so it's our job to follow through on this as much as we can. It's a process that, as everyone well knows, it's much needed to get these data centers up and running.
Yeah.
So I am very confident in that they will meet their goals.
I actually think you're right, Commissioner, and I'll ask you to respond to this, but this didn't happen overnight. A lot of planning went into this, and do you not feel that that's the reason that Entergy, the primary electricity supplier, the electricity supplier, certainly to the data centers in the central Mississippi area, they're accommodating this without the need to put the burden on the ratepayers? But this was in the works. They didn't get blindsided like we've seen in other parts of the country.
Yes. Yeah, there are some places that are very concerned that these big hyperscalers may leave. But Entergy, in the way they've worked their contract, they can't leave without a cost.
Right.
And that cost is not supposed to be shed back to our ratepayers.
Yeah. I mean, and that's actually included explicitly in the legislation.
Yes, sir.
State
yes,
side.
Sir. Yes. And in Mississippi Power, with their data center in the Meridian area.
Yeah.
Same thing. I mean, they kept me abreast of what was going on and the other commissioners, and we're very confident that our people are protected.
Yeah, and that's the way Haley explains it, is that we got this one or two really big customers coming in, and essentially they're absorbing the cost of what's needed to modernize our grid, to ensure that it's reliable, and to increase capacity, that because they have these giant concentrated customers, that we're actually going to benefit from this. And the way he explains it is that if you look at kind of a trend line trajectory of where electricity costs would go without these investments, correct, and where they are going is actually keeping that rate of increase lower.
Yes, sir. This is a blessing. And also, I would say that they did a great job of keeping us confident and not sharing that contract, so to speak, because other states are following our model now.
Okay.
So when we went to Seattle, there was conversation about that. I could hear it in a distance of what Mississippi is doing.
Okay.
So we are on the radar.
Good.
And everybody's watching what we're doing.
Well, I still think it's because, as you know, they were involved early on when
yes,
when it was just in the conceptual discussion stages back in 2019, energy was at the table.
Yes, sir.
And in fact, the decision was made once energy was able to convince with empirical data the investor, in this case Amazon, we can make this happen.
Yes, sir.
And also we can do it in a way that won't affect the ratepayers. But I would just ask you this as a commissioner, just to kind of put aside any fears that people have. Can you assure the people that they will not, as just normal consumer ratepayers, that they will not be responsible for these costs being?
Yes, I can assure you what I've been told.
Okay.
And so, like I said, we don't have any kind of understanding what's in that contract.
Sure.
But what I'm being told, the ratepayers will not share any of this burden.
Okay.
And as you said, our grid system is a machine that's constantly being worked on by our men and women out there, and those linemen and those folks that are behind the scene. They're constantly doing upgrades.
Okay.
We have to maintain what we have, plus do
Yes.
our new stuff.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I'm concerned about is reconducting, building our lines up now while the demand is low, till we can reconduct. We can move things around through the switching that they have, to where we can prepare for those load pockets that are coming, and they're working on that.
I got you. Okay. Well, that's good to know. What else you got to report from the PSC to us?
Well, we talk about one of the things is security.
Yeah.
And that's up on our mind as much as we can talk about with the utility companies. But they're getting hit anywhere from 1 to 3 million times in a 24-hour period.
It's incredible.
So it's whether it's a small fish or a big fish that's trying to get in. I have full confidence in what they're telling me. They're on top of it. And I have been to all of 4 power plants now, and security is one of their number one priorities.
Yeah, should
and
be.
Safety is very. We have some bad actors that's trying to get into our grid system.
Sure,
whether
constantly.
it be gas or water or electricity, it doesn't matter. They're trying to get in all times.
Are there some formal requirements, Commissioner, on the part of the utility companies to report to the Commission of their status, their actions, the protections they have in place, without revealing the technical details?
Not in a formal way, in an informal way.
Okay.
So I like I say, I talk to them constantly about that.
Okay.
And making sure that number one is safety and reliability, and
Sure.
that's what we focus on.
Sure.
Because if power's down, no one benefits from it.
Yeah. Rates for natural gas actually up year over year right
Yes,
now.
sir.
Last I checked that.
Yeah.
Do you have any outlook into the future of that?
Not really.
It's volatile.
It's volatile. It's the liquid nitrogen gas being shipped abroad is having some influence on it. The new power generation coming on being natural gas. That's the middle ground, so to speak, that takes us into the nuclear.
Gotcha.
And there's some conversation going on with Port Gibson about another facility going there.
Gotcha.
They're in that, and our president is pushing nuclear.
Big time.
He's wanting to hand out some grants to someone. And so I'm sure we're in that conversation.
Before we go, do you think that's the future? Nuclear?
Yes, sir.
I do
Yes,
too.
sir.
Yeah. I'm glad to know our PSC supports this. I
Yes,
think it's a
sir.
good move.
And
Yes,
the
sir.
leadership in our state,
Yep.
Governor Tate and Governor Hoseman, that they're involved with it, and they're pushing this.
Appreciate you coming in, Commissioner.
Thank you, sir.
You man.
From the Seabrook, Middays with Gerard Gibert
It is on.
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. We appreciate Southern District Public Service Commissioner Wayne Carr for being with us in the Element Wealth Studio. Appreciate his insight and report from the PSC. This is something that is certainly top of most people's lists. They're seeing what's happening in a few places around the country, I still contend just in digging into those situations, like in Georgia with Commissioner Carr was talking about, Virginia a little bit. Poor planning allowed all these data centers to come in to ratchet up consumption of electricity without really planning for the supply side of that. And then they get behind the eight ball, as the saying goes, and are scrambling around to catch up and ensure grid reliability and trying to figure out how to pay for that. Poor planning. That did not happen here. There was lots of a preliminary planning that went on for about 3 years, honestly, before the deal was struck, and a little more than 3 years, about 5, before we put a shovel in the ground. So, I think all of this is good news for the state of Mississippi, and I applaud everyone involved, including the electricity suppliers. I think they've done a great job of ensuring that the consumers of the power will pay for it adequately, and that the residential and business consumers outside of those couple of huge customers for electricity, in terms of electricity, will pay their fair share, as the saying goes. And why wouldn't the power company want to do that? They've got to generate revenue from the production of that electricity, and would not go over well, of course, if consumers were subsidizing this big consumer. That wouldn't be fair. Wouldn't be equitable. I don't expect that to happen based on everything that's been implemented and everything that is being planned. Robert Reich, he goes out and says over the weekend, layoffs have hit 1.1 million this year. That is true, the most since the pandemic. Yet corporate profits continue to hit record highs, with corporations increasingly spending those earnings on stock buybacks and enriching execs and shareholders. This is what a rigged economy looks like. No execs, no shareholders, no companies, no jobs there, Robert. I know that's some second-order thinking that's above your pay grade, as the saying goes. What do they want? Just keep those people on.
There's a joke somewhere in there about everything's above him. But
I just wonder sometimes. We've been talking today, for example, about having some excess costs that need to be stripped out of the education, the K-12 education system in the state of Mississippi. Totally agree. Yes, I do think we get complacent. And we just allow jobs to continue and expenses to continue. Well, we've just always done it that way. That's usually what you get without really, well, maybe there's a better way to do it. Like I said, why don't we take the A-rated districts and figure out what they're doing and look at their models? And I guarantee you, Rhino, without even looking at it, if you put an A-rated district in this state side by side with a D or an F, and you look at the org charts and you look at the administrative spending relative to the classroom spending, bet you that the F district spends more on administration than the A does. So there's no justification for it. We're not getting the results as a result of that excess spending. That does need to be stripped out. But let's look at the model. Let's take the ones that are doing the best and figure out how to replicate that, while at the same time working with them to strip unnecessary extraneous costs. I think the taxpayers deserve that, no doubt about it. But this fool, Robert Reich, doesn't understand basic investing or economics or risk-taking. If I'm a shareholder, I expect a return on that. That means if you've got people working for you you don't need because there's nothing for them to do, you got to get rid of them. Isn't that what we're calling for in the K-12 system? We've been talking about that. How's this different? It's not. But of course, government, well, that's different. That's what they want to tell you. No, it's not. That's why we need a more business-like approach to managing government. On the C Spire text line, we're talking about the consumption tax as a preferred method of raising revenue. That's long been a conservative principle, overtaxing income or property, which most people object to, especially the latter, in property. And the question is, are there any countries with a consumption tax? Yeah, like 160 or 70 of them last time I checked. It's called in other countries, it's called a value-added tax, a VAT. And it's actually a tax that is levied at every point in the supply chain. So from the manufacturer, from the material supplier to the manufacturer, that's got a tax on it. From the manufacturer to the distributor, that's got a tax on it. From the distributor to the retailer, that's got a tax on it. From the retailer to the consumer, that's got a tax on it. So you got several layers of what are called VAT taxes, value-added taxes. Yeah, very common. That's why the GDP per capita in Mississippi, it's been growing, which is great, lowest in the country, is greater than that of the UK. And France and Spain and Italy and Greece and all the EU nations per capita, right? It has been growing here in Mississippi, which is a good thing. Still the lowest per capita in the country, but exceeds that of the entire dang EU. This is one of the reasons, because they tax the snot out of people.
But to find a country that is predominantly consumption tax, you got to look at the oil-rich countries of the Middle East.
Qatar is an example.
Qatar, UAE, those kind of countries.
Actually, Qatar doesn't even have a VAT tax. They have a corporate tax, and then they tax.
They've got a sales tax, which is a lot of theirs, and they've got
natural resources. Yeah, they have a tax on that.
Taxes on that, and they also, I believe, they tax. I guess it would still be considered a sales tax, but it's only in certain industries like tourism.
That's right. That's right. Oman has no personal income tax, has a 5% VAT. Bahrain does not tax personal income, but has a 10% VAT, value-added tax. So the Bahamas generated through a 12% sales tax. Also tourism, but no income, inheritance, or capital gains taxes. But when you got people come from all over the world descending on your country, your small country, spending money and paying that 12% VAT, well, yeah, you could sustain your government and operate it with that. We don't have that luxury. So that's what would work. But if we wanted to eliminate or certainly greatly reduce property taxes, which I think is a fantastic idea in the state of Mississippi, we could do that by allowing cities and counties to increase their sales taxes and collect money that way. That way everybody pays, which is another benefit. Even people involved in illicit activity still spend their money. They're not paying any income tax because their income's obviously not reported. But they would pay sales taxes and contribute. Phillip in Walthall County, the VAT. And you visit Europe and keep receipts, you get a refund when you leave if you're not an EU citizen. That's right, Phil. Appreciate you pointing that out. Visit Germany often. Sometimes not worth the time for the paperwork, but if you spend a lot of euros on it, it is. Robert Reich should get with the times and stop preaching nonsense on the C Spire text line. Anyone can pick up their phone and start investing with $5 and become part of the crowd earning gains from these companies' profits and dividend payments, says Tim and Raymond. You just greatly describe basic capitalism. Thank you for that, Tim.
But that requires delayed gratification.
That's true.
That's an artifact of colonialism and white supremacy, according to the idiot leftists like Robert Reich.
Unbelievable. Yes, Gerard received Christmas card reminders from my county tax collector this morning. Well, here in Madison County, I got mine before Thanksgiving, Reese and Clarksdale, telling me what my property tax bill is for next year, which is hefty. If we don't pay the tax, take it even if it's paid for. That's robbery on the C Spire tax line. Rusty says, how would a consumption tax work? So I hope, Rusty, that we explain it there. It's just a tax when you buy stuff. It could be a VAT tax. That's a form of a consumption tax, as we just described, through the various layers in the supply chain. But at the retail level, which is what we're accustomed to in this country, where you pay sales taxes, you'd have like a federal sales tax. But with respect to property taxes in Mississippi, since, again, those fund school districts, counties, municipalities, eliminating or reducing those would require some way to replace that revenue, and sales tax is the most likely way, unless somehow the state government sent more money down, right? Would be there's been a call for increasing, because remember, sales taxes go primarily to the state. In fact, that's our top source of revenue. It's about 38% of our revenue. And there is a diversion of, I think it's 17.5% that goes back down to the municipalities. There have been some municipalities, as you know, who have called for an increase in the diversion. In other words, state keeps less, sends more down to the location, the city where the transaction occurred to increase their revenues. And then we got this whole PERS monster sitting out there that we got to fund. Coming right back with the final segment on this Monday.
Polyupa, Mississippi.
Are we going to do this?
Middays with Gerard Gibert
Keep rolling. 3, 2, 1.
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Rick Scott had to pay a $1.7 billion fine because of the Medicare fraud that he oversaw. Now he's a senator from Florida. He had the gall to call me out for advocating for Medicare for all. You know what? I'm sick of the $171 billion of profits that private insurance are making. I believe healthcare has to be a human right, and we need Medicare for everyone in America.
Well, that's Representative Ro Khanna. He represents the Silicon Valley area of California. So I'm looking at United Healthcare's financial statements. He talked about them, of course, being the largest beneficiary of Obamacare, and there's no doubt that when you require people to buy your product, that's a pretty big deal, right? When you're requiring them with a penalty. Now, as we've noted, the penalty's zero, but it started out as it's something that would bite you if you didn't have insurance. No doubt about it. But I'm looking at their financial statements just so he will know there, and they really have seen their income actually decline. They made $20 billion on revenues of $350 billion. In 2022 and 2023, they made $33 billion, which isn't a lot, on $371 billion relative to their revenue. But in 2024, the last year they've completed, they made 14. So they went from 20 to 22 to 14. So and $14 billion on $400 billion of revenues, about 3.3%. That's grocery store margins. Not all that great. But they didn't make 100. The total industry made about $45 billion, not 171. I'm not sure where Representative Khanna is getting his information from, but those numbers don't work. You would kind of think that they would know that, but it's just one of those things where if you serve in Congress, you pretty much say anything, and it just seems like a lot of people take it to the bank. But it's
like the fact that they claim health care should be a right.
Which is crazy, because that would require, of course, law to codify that. Certainly, as you know, that's...
Well, I mean, following their own loopy logic, that means that every American should be given a firearm because the Second Amendment protects your right to bear arms. And if rights mean you get free stuff at the sweat of someone else's brow, then where's my free gun?
And that truly is a right, and that is enumerated in the Bill of Rights. And that's where they, I think, get off the rails in asserting that health care, which, as we pointed out, is the provision of goods and services by other people. You don't have a right to that. That's essentially suggesting that you have a right to the work product of others, which is insanity. You could argue that that's a form of slavery, at a minimum indentured servitude, and that's not right either. So, really crazy.
But
terrible.
Democrats have always been the party of slavery.
That's absolutely true, and that doesn't seem to get the attention that it should. Well, that's what they're calling for. Man, On the C Spire text line, we were talking about just all the various forms of income, the people who don't work that I'm afraid would benefit from these additional provisions of just for getting married. You'd pay no income tax in Mississippi under one proposal, as long as you stay married. Don't forget they also received an earned income tax credit on free income to start with, along with the other freebies. Yes, so the earned income tax credit, a federal tax credit, is totally refundable, meaning even if you don't make enough money to have a tax liability, the federal government still sends you money. Last time I checked that, Rhino, it's estimated there's about $8 billion of fraud, much of which comes from abroad. It's the bad guys that steal these Social Security numbers and file tax returns, make it up. This is how bad our systems are, that allow that and send checks out. That's how bad our electronic systems are, that desperately need to be modernized. And the same is true in the state of Mississippi. We need desperately to modernize the information systems that we use to administer SNAP and Medicaid and all these other various programs.
And that doesn't even take into account the actual American citizens whose Social Security numbers got stolen and are now being charged for tax fraud by the IRS.
That's absolutely right. So the breaches of these systems, this is what the whole idea was, and we go grab these Social Security numbers, and to a large extent they're used to file bogus tax returns that then trigger refunds coming back. Payments, actually. They're not even refunds. They're just payments, such as what our texter sent here, under the earned income tax credit. Before we get out of here, and I'll get to this tomorrow, we've got the no tax on tips, no tax on overtime that went into effect in the actually January 1st, 25. You know that doesn't apply for state income tax purposes unless our state government passes law to align with federal law on that. And I think they should, and we're going to be pushing for that so that your taxes and tips are also deductible like they are for federal purposes, for state purposes as well. But we got to change the law to do that. Out of here today, back tomorrow. Stay safe and God bless everyone.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.